Thank you for staying with us, and we're talking with Glenda about human design. Before we get more on to human design, let's find out a little bit about your journey.
Okay. It's been fun.
You've certainly had an interesting one. You've certainly had an interesting one. Now, your mum was told she couldn't have children.
That's correct, yes. She was told that, you know, children weren't on her agenda, and 8 years before I came along, she had my brother. So that was great excitement. And then 8 years later, lo and behold, she was pregnant with me.
So who told her she couldn't have children?
Oh, some medical authority or other. She proved them wrong.
She did indeed. And what was it when you were born that she got a knowingness or a...
Well, before she was actually knew she was pregnant, she was having dreams about having a girl, about having a child who was involved in healing and helping the planet and working in quite an amazing way, and she just thought she was being totally delusional. And the next thing she knew, she was pregnant.
So that gave her some proof.
Yes. So she was already pregnant with me at the stage of the dreams, but she had no idea about that. And she's quite well renowned for her psychic dreams over the years. It's not an isolated case. So. That's
what I was going to ask you. Is your mum into this sort of stuff?
Oh, definitely. She's one of my greatest supporters. And I grew up in quite an alternative environment that, you know, I had quite severe allergies and problems with my legs very early on in my life, and when I was 3 years old, which was quite a while ago now, the doctors wanted to operate on me, and she took me to a chiropractor, which was very radical back in those days, and he worked with me and I went to ballet classes and they straightened my legs, and she was told I'd be in a wheelchair if I didn't have the operations.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
And your parents were farmers, so you were living a bit isolated.
Yeah, we lived about 5 miles from the closest neighbours.
Okay, so you kind of commune with nature a bit when you're a youngster.
Yes, well, you know, my brother went to boarding school when I was 4, and I really didn't have anyone else to hang out with but nature.
And so, you know, with your communing with nature, what?
I guess I just got to, you know, I can't even explain it because it's my life, you know. I understand nature in a much different way to a lot of people because I spent most of my spare time as a child, you know, playing with plants and insects and, you know, all from the sublime to the ridiculous, from, you know, making little shrines out of them to pulling them apart, as children do.
Were they dead? Oh, don't answer that one.
You don't want to know.
No, I don't want to know.
Well, when you live on a farm, it's very real, you know. That's part of being on a farm, and you know, you deal with life and death every day. To me, that was just part of life.
And you were exploring as a child how it all worked.
Yeah.
So how was your experience different, though, to a lot of children that don't have that gift of growing up with nature?
Well, when we finally moved to town, when I was nearly to go to high school, it was kind of like I discovered that we were a little bit different to everybody else. And you know, my parents had a very healthy respect for nature and the cycles, and, you know, my mother can still project what's going to happen in the weather by looking at the moon and things like that. So, and my dad was quite good at dowsing. My great-grandfather was a dowser and a healer. He would go around and douse people's injuries or illnesses in their bodies, and then I don't know exactly what he did because he was dead when I was born, but he used to do things to help people heal themselves. So.
Wow.
And I grew up with that sort of influence around me all the time. So when I moved to town, and plus my grandparents thought that the whole education system were out trying to turn us into clones. So the education department never really had a great deal of authority in our life.
Okay.
It was very much we were encouraged to think freely and be ourselves and engage in debate, and we didn't have to agree with our parents.
Okay, and then fast tracking, you left home at about 16 odd?
Yes, I left home.
And you ended up in Byron for a while?
And went up as far as Cape and, you know, had a good time being a wild child, being a hippie and exploring and
as you said, it was sex, drug and rock and rolls at a...
Absolutely.
Because a lot of people seem to have an idea that for those that are doing healing work in the world, that they've come from a very pristine, holier-than-thou background.
Well, that's a really interesting irony, because if you understand astrology, the planet Neptune rules spirituality and sex, drugs and rock and roll.
Of course.
So it's all a duality. We live in a duality.
We're back in that duality again.
Yes, and you know, and I've experienced both sides of it, and I was very into, you know, sex, drugs and rock and roll. I worked in, you know, photography and advertising in my early 20s, and you know, I've done some amazing things in my life and had some very wild times, and it feels like another life.
Yeah.
And then when I got involved in the alternative industry, I did become quite pious there for a while, which was quite, you know, I think I was a bit sanctimonious. But I had to experience that as well, and, you know, and I sort of, you know, to me now it's just all about being real, and that's what I love about human design. There's no moralistic stance on human design. It's about being real.
Okay.
It's about...
Well, just getting to how you're led to human design, you were then studying at Nature Care College?
Yes, I spent many years at
10
Nature
years
Care.
or something, I think?
Something like that. I actually ran into one of my old teachers when I was coming in here today.
Yeah.
Yes, no, I was at Nature Care for many years. I was actually very ill, and I was seeing a doctor at Nature Care's clinic, and she suggested I study natural therapies because I had grown up in an environment where we took vitamins and minerals and herbs and lived a fairly natural way. She sort of said, well, you know more than most of the people in the college, so why don't you actually study it? And I was kind of like, oh, okay. So I actually started studying at Nature Care because I had to change my career because that was part of the reason I was unwell. And started doing, you know, I did the massage section to get it out of the road because I thought I'd hate massage, and I discovered I had quite a gift for massage, and not only could I feel the knots in people's bodies, but I could feel their energy.
Okay.
And from there I studied, and I studied the nutritional nuts and bolts side of it, but I also studied spiritual healing and crystal healing, and I meditated for hours a day for years and exploring myself, and I studied a lot of kinesiology. I taught 3 of the main branches of kinesiology at one stage. I have enough diplomas to wallpaper several rooms, an NLP master trainer. I've done many things.
Okay, and then that culminated, what was about 1990? A friend was going away and asked you to look after her clinic?
Yes, that was, I was studying massage. I'd finished studying massage, I was just starting out, and, you know, I was working in as an environmental allergy unit in a hospital. I was massaging people in there, and I was working in a health food shop part-time, the whole trip that you go through when you're trying to change over. And one of my friends who I was studying nutrition with, she was going away and asked me to look after her massage practice, which I said, okay, I'll do that. That'll be fun. And she fell in love and never came back.
So you ended up, I mean, what a gift was that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, in hindsight, you know, I was incredibly grateful at the time because it was already a very successful practice. So I didn't have all the struggle that a lot of people have. And now I look back, I understand from my design that it was part of my being a generator. The right things come to me easily. If I'm meeting resistance, I'm going in the wrong direction.
Yeah. Okay, so that's always the signal, isn't it? That's the signpost.
Yes.
If it's flowing, then you're heading in that innate.
And that doesn't mean that I don't have challenges, but it's how I deal with the challenges.
Okay.
And you know, I know if it's just a little bit of a hiccup, major resistance is the signpost to get out now.
And then in about 2003, was it? A friend came back from overseas, or their brother was in human design or something?
Yes, it probably was around it was 2002, 2003, and yes, one of my friends had been over in the UK visiting her brother, and she came back full of all of this stuff, and I was kind of like, and by that time, having been in the industry for a long time, I was kind of like, oh yeah, another thing.
Yeah, it was like, how many more modalities do we need?
Yes, and someone else beating their drum or whatever, and you can get a bit cynical because there's so many things, and I try and be open. But she said, look, give me your birth data, and so he sent me my chart, and he sent me some information, and it was love at first sight. And when I actually saw the graphics of human design, I'd actually had a dream about it many before.
Oh, okay.
And I had been I had actually tried to create what human design is myself. And now I understand human design. Creating it myself was going to completely blow my brain up, I would say. It's a very complex science, and creating it yourself is a bit of a big ask.
Okay. We'll take another break and we'll come back and find out some more about human design. Stay with us.